Oh, hello there. Good morning. What's going on? One last little sip of coffee before we get going here. So as soon as you jump in here, when and if you see this live, do me a favor, drop a hello in the comments so I know at least that it worked at some point. I have off screen here my iPad, and I'm waiting for it to kind of refresh and see if it's working on my end. But what are we going to talk about this morning? Well, I can see little things, tell me there are sounds coming out, so that's good. I have done the mic check. I have, there you go. Looks live to me. Cool. So I did the mic check. I could hear everything. It looks like it's going well, so I'm going to shut that off. And of course, the hair is on point. This morning, we are going to talk about an emergency fund. So what is an emergency fund, and what does it have to do with a budget? What does it have to do with a plan for your money? Well, it really is kind of your own insurance. You are ensuring that when an emergency happens to you, then you'll be able to deal with it and move through it. I like to call it the emergency fund drama insurance. And thank you, Phil. I appreciate that. You can hear me. That's excellent. And good morning to you, sir. So drama insurance, what does that mean? So I will give you a quick personal example. For whatever reason, we have absolutely god-awful luck with dishwashers. And when we were trying to get out of debt, we had a dishwasher that went just belly up on us. I am not the most handy individual in the world, but I did my best to fix it, and eventually it well exceeded my abilities. Because we were getting out of debt and we had this thing called the emergency fund set up, we took what could have been a big deal and made it merely an inconvenience. Now, before we started getting out of debt, before we started paying attention to our money, if as soon as we had an emergency, man, we'd hit the ceiling. It'd be like, we don't have a dishwasher. Oh no, how did people live? What are we gonna do? And we would have ran immediately to Best Buy to buy the top of the line dishwasher that may or may not have had a TV in it as well. I don't know, but we would have financed it for sure. And if we'd have done that 90 days same as cash thing, which by the way, very rarely is, because you ain't gonna pay that thing off in 90 days. And then you're gonna end up paying like 18% interest. It is a huge ripoff. Why not just buy the thing? So instead of doing our knee-jerk, it's a big emergency, let's just go out and buy something, we stopped. We took a deep breath. We washed dishes by hand for a while. You mean like before people had dishwashers? Yeah, there are people today that don't have dishwashers, and they are just fine. Now, I don't want to be that person. I would rather fold a metric ton of laundry than do dishes. I hate doing dishes for whatever reason. It's not something I enjoy. But because we had this huge goal of getting out of debt over here, I was okay with being mildly inconvenienced for a period of time. So when you take your emergency and you take the drama out of it, you are simply left with an inconvenience. That's what the emergency fund does for you. Something I tell my trainees at the PD all the time. Most of the things we do in law enforcement, despite what you see on the media, despite what you see on TV shows, despite what you see, online, most of the things we do not happen just like that. They don't. We have the ability to slow things down, think them through, make a well-informed decision, and not have a knee-jerk reaction. Yes, we have to make life and death decisions as law enforcement officers. Absolutely. But that is such a minuscule portion of what we do in law enforcement, but that ain't the sexy part, right? That's not the part that people want to talk about. That's not the part that inspires us, right? We want to run and gun and chase bad guys and take them to prison and blah, blah, blah. That's not what law enforcement is like 95% of the time. It's just not. Same thing with your money. When you have an emergency, and side note, you get to define what that is. An emergency to me is not necessarily an emergency to you, and vice versa. Again, that's one of the beauties of creating this personal spending plan, which is just a sexy way of saying budget. When you have this plan in place, you can slow down, you can make well thought out, well informed decisions. When we ended up getting a dishwasher, we had shopped around for weeks and we got a sick deal on one that included hauling away the old one, installing the new one, and it was great and it didn't cost us a ton of money. So that is conceptually what the emergency fund is. By the way, guys, as you're joining at any point, if you have questions about what I'm talking about today, what I talked about yesterday, if you have questions about personal finance or budgeting that I haven't talked about, drop them in the comments. If you're live, I'll bring them up. I'll answer them right as I can. If it's after I go live and you're watching the recorded version, I'll be going through the comments throughout the week and making notes and whatnot and addressing them as they come up. So if you have questions, please feel free to drop them here. So that's conceptually what the emergency fund is. But what about in reality? How much should you put in an emergency fund? Well, we subscribe to Dave Ramsey's whole outlook on personal finance, and I've kind of reworked it to make it more cop friendly because we all love our lingo. So what Dave calls the baby emergency fund, I call the rookie emergency fund. It's $1,000 in the bank. That's it. Find a way to put $1,000 aside, and you put it where you're not going to spend it. It still needs to be accessible. So this is not an investment. You're not going to go buy stock or mutual funds or anything. It just needs to be hanging out there waiting for you to need it. Put that $1,000 aside and then start paying down your debt. Start creating that budget. And after you have gotten out of debt, and we'll bring that up in a minute, after you've gotten out of debt, then you have your veteran emergency fund. And that's where you have 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside in case of emergency. For example, I want to retire, right? I want to retire very, very soon. And if I do that, there is going to be a gap between the day I retire and the day way over here where I get my first paycheck. I didn't know this until last couple of years or so when I started paying attention and asking questions. There's like a 3-month gap for whatever reason, because it's the inefficiency of government. I will still get paid for those 3 months, but for the sake of argument, let's say I retire January 1st. I may not see a paycheck until March or April. So I got to come up with 3 to 4 months worth of expenses, including my mortgage, putting food on the table, etc., to get us through. Does that qualify as an emergency? I would say so. However, we're also planning for that eventuality. See, emergencies, most times an emergency is something you probably should have seen coming, right? Your appliances are going to die. Your car is going to die. Your car is going to need tires. It shouldn't surprise you when you walk out and you're like, oh no, I've been driving on, worn down tires for 6 months. What a shock. You could have been saving for that the entire time. Now, that's not necessarily something I want you to use your emergency fund for. That's a completely different topic called sinking funds, which may or may not talk about this week. But it is step 4 in my brand new 5-day budgeting challenge. And I go way in depth into what a sinking fund is, how to create it, and the kinds of categories that would qualify as something. Let's see here. Phil just popped in. Unless you add an additional 3 to 4 months into your veteran fund. That's true. So what I was saying about that kind of gap that we're looking at, we have now a separate line item in our budget called, it's either like, gap insurance, or which is another financial vehicle that I'm just using the term for, or our retirement nest egg, I think is what the wife calls it, what Katie labeled it as, is the nest egg. So since we're out of debt, any extra money we can, we're throwing into that to make those 3 to 4 months between when I retire and when I am getting that first paycheck, that'll get us through, right? So that veteran fund if you get injured off the job. So I got injured, which is why I'm all scruffy and whatnot, and won't be doing this for very much longer because my back is starting to not be happy with me. But I'm on workers' comp. So I'm still getting paid while I am at home taking care of my back. Now, earlier in the year, actually at the end of last year, I got injured off duty. And I had to use my sick leave, vacation time, I was on light duty, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a real danger that I was gonna run out of my accruals because I had used a bunch of it when Josie got sick, when she had her issues. So when HR called me and said, okay, you need to go home because you can't work, I had a very real concern of, well, what happens when my sick leave runs out? Like, well, you'll just be absent without pay. I'm sorry, what now? I need to put food on the table. I have a family. I have obligations. Enter the emergency fund. And as soon as I said those words to her about, hey, hang on, man, this is freaking me out, I realized, oh, this is why we have an emergency fund. So it could have been a very, very scary thing to not get paid for a couple of months. That's why we have the emergency fund. We would have been okay. Everything worked out, obviously, but I was able to focus on convalescing it was my hand that was injured, on convalescing my injury, as opposed to how am I going to provide for my family? Because we had that emergency fund in place, I was able to make informed, logical decisions from a place of confidence, as opposed to being reactive and freaking out. When you are freaking out, you make bad decisions. You're not thinking clearly, right? It can be really, really scary. So this emergency fund, like I said at the beginning of the video here, it really is drama insurance. When you can take the drama out of a particular experience, then it's just inconvenient. Then you're like, okay, well, this sucks, yes, but there is a way out of it. So we've talked about conceptually what an emergency fund is. We've talked about how much it is, right? The rookie fund is $1,000. The veteran fund is going to differ depending on what your expenses are. Depending on where you live, how much your obligations are every month. Let's say outgoing, you've got an obligation of $4,000 a month. So you would want between $12,000 and $24,000 in the emergency fund, whatever your comfort level is. And I actually left that decision up to Katie. I asked her, where do you want to fall? At the 3-month, the 6-month, what? And we opted for less because of the coverages I have through work, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got, we were bolstering it a little bit, but as it stands now, we've got about 10 grand set aside in case something bad happens. Now we've had it go as low as, I want to say about 7, when our last 2 dogs, Sophie and Maddie, got really, really sick, and it was expensive, and that was an emergency to us. And we took care of them, and we did the best we could for them. We didn't have money set aside for that particular issue, but it was something we needed to do because they were members of our family. So we did what we felt we needed to do. And that's not for you to judge. And it's not for me to judge what's an emergency to you. Maybe you're not a dog person. You're like, whatever, if they go, they go. Okay. That's you, and that's fine. I mean, you have no soul. But other than that, so we've talked about what the emergency fund is, how much you want to consider putting in, but what is it not? The emergency fund is not a, I've been working really hard and I need a vacation now fund. It's not a, hey, you know what? Our couch sucks. I would like a new couch. It's not that. It's not the, I don't want to cook dinner tonight fund. This is an emergency. No, it's not. That's you being lazy. And there's nothing wrong with being lazy. I'm not saying don't eat out. I'm saying don't dip into your emergency fund for things that aren't emergencies. I think we can all agree that that doesn't really fall under the category of emergency. Getting your money under control is no small feat. It's so easy for me to say the words, we paid off over $77,000 in debt. Great. That was a simple sentence to say. You know what wasn't easy? Freaking doing it. I wasn't at home for the first 2 years of my second daughter's life. I mean, that's what it felt like. Of course, I was actually here, but I was gone a lot because I was busting my butt to get us out of debt. Having the emergency fund in place is just that extra insurance that when bad things happen, it doesn't completely knock you sideways and force you to reroute your entire plan surrounding your finances. To a degree, it relieves some stress. So you may be thinking, okay, $1,000. What happens when my car dies? Are you going to buy a car for $1,000? Well, you probably could. It's not going to be pretty. But what if something bigger happens that costs you more than $1,000? Is that a possibility? Yep, it is. Is that scary? Hell yes. Should you be scared? Probably. But that's kind of the motivating part of fear. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of fear. It's kind of on a scale. If you are just totally comfortable over here, and this is abject terror, and this is normal, right? I want you just over, there you go. Just on this side. I want you on just this side of comfortable. I want you scared enough to get off your ass and get to work. Because if you're so comfortable that you don't do anything, that's a problem. But if you're so freaked out that you don't do anything, that's a problem. So having that $1,000 is going to take care of most things. We've all heard about Murphy, right? If something can go wrong, it will. The emergency fund is drama insurance and Murphy repellent. It keeps Murphy away from your door. It acts as a buffer between your plan and life. So let me ask you a question. And you can either answer it in here or not. And that's okay. This is what I want you to think about. If something happened to you today that we all agree, yes, this is an emergency. Pardon me. Let's say, for example, your refrigerator dies and you've got a bunch of food that's going to spoil. You need a fridge. Let's operate from the perspective that, yes, that is an emergency. Can you go buy you a fridge today, right now, for cash? Can you do that? Do you have the ability to do that? Notice I didn't say using your credit card as an emergency, and I've got a definite perspective on that. And we're almost done, so we'll just jump into that part of it. It is my perspective, and you may or may not agree, and that's okay, we can still be friends. Adding debt to an emergency isn't helping the emergency. All you're doing is adding issues to it. And Phil jumps in, and I'm going to test a couple things, actually. I'm going to leave your comment up because it should go away by itself in 15 seconds. But Phil is a good example. He's got money set aside for his fridge collapse, which is bound to happen at some point, right? And that's good. That makes me feel fantastic. So good on you, Phil. Oh, good. And it did go away all by itself. So the credit card, that is convenient. Absolutely. It's also wicked dangerous because let's say life continues to happen to you and you tell yourself, I'm going to pay this off. I get paid next week, but I need a fridge today. I'm going to do it and then I'm going to pay it off. Well, then guess what? Something else happens. And you don't end up paying it off. If I had $1 for every person I've talked to that has told me, I pay my credit cards off every single month, there wouldn't be literally trillions of dollars in this country in credit card debt. I talk to people all the time that tell me they pay it off. Some of them, I'm sure, actually do. But numbers don't lie. Numbers tell me something different. And it is such a dangerous game. I am extraordinarily disciplined with our money, as is Katie. Could we have a credit card to gain points and to, I'm going to get over on Visa this month? Could we game that system? Maybe. I'm very disciplined. But I also paid off over 77 grand in debt, and I know myself, and I know that things that are convenient are easy. And if something is easy, it's not necessarily the best route to take. I don't play that game. I'm not going to jump in that pit and play with those snakes. No, thank you. I would rather want something, work toward it, and just buy it outright. When you use a credit card, typically, in an emergency situation, you're just adding to the drama. You go further into debt. You are financing the emergency, right? Which means you've just taken something that could last this long, and now you've made it last this long. If you have the discipline to do that, hey, I'm not here to judge your journey. I'm just giving you a different perspective to tell you that just using cash has given this house at MCPD a level of peace that I have never experienced before. I've never felt so in control of our finances, confident in our financial future. The fact that we are looking at retiring in 4 months and actively working towards figuring out how to do that, and where the injury falls and all that, I don't know. But we're conceptualizing that because we're planning ahead. Now, I may be in law enforcement for another year and a half, God forbid, but it may not be until March of 2022 for all I know. But we're having those conversations now instead of panicking in 4 months. I want to be done. I'm not going to work anymore. Oh, great, dummy. Now what? How are you going to pay for your mortgage? How are you going to do all these things? So again, since I'm going live all this week, and I'm trying to figure out where my, oh, there we go. I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to turn that on. So I spent last week finishing up my new budget challenge, my 5-day budgeting challenge. If you go to the link that is on your screen right now, and you can't click it, it's not that fancy, but if you go to themotorcopmindset.com/budget challenge, you'll be taken to a landing page, enter your name and your email. This is all free. I will walk you over a 5-day period through 5 easy to follow steps how to create your very first budget. Not just create it, but follow it and sustain it. I'm going to challenge you, see what I did there? I'm going to challenge you to do this. It doesn't cost you a dime. Prove me wrong, right? It's going to get you to a place where we are now. And I have neither the time nor the thesaurus in my head to really articulate to you how amazing it feels to be in complete control of our money. I've never regretted a second of the work we put in almost a decade ago. We started in 2009 and we got out of debt at the end of 2011. So it's coming up on our 9-year anniversary of being out of debt. So I am very, very excited, and I really appreciate you guys being here. I will be back tomorrow at 0800 Left Coast time. Thanks for taking the time this morning. Phil, thanks for all your comments. I appreciate you, brother. Be safe today. And again, if you have questions, please drop comments here. Send me a direct email, jason@themotorcopmindset.com. Let me know what you want me to talk about. I think tomorrow I might touch on maybe sinking funds since I brought them up today. It is step 4 of the 5-day budgeting challenge. And the wife just popped in and says she's watching day 4 today. I'm having her go through the sequence so I make sure it works, which is kind of nice before you announce something. Hey, go to the thing, and it doesn't work. So anyway, I'm going to let you all go. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow morning at 0800. Cheers. Have a good one. Be safe.